Has everyone been enjoying Aghanim's Labyrinth? Thanks, Valve, for letting everyone play even without the Battle Pass. Time to get into the real exciting news, though. What up, ProGuides family? My name is Dan, and today we're going to be running down patch 7.27b. Please note that this is not an analysis video, and a more in-depth analysis will come later. Today's question of the day is, if every hero is overpowered, are any of them? I can't wait to see all the new creative builds players are going to do. While IceFrog advertised this patch as a hero patch, there were a few item changes as well. Abyssal Blade, Mjolnir, Silver Edge, and Solar Crest are no longer disassemblable. Echo Saber, alternatively, can be disassembled now. Veil of Discord can be applied on invulnerable units, such as those in Astral Imprisonment or Yules. Orchid Malevolence's attack speed has been reduced. Monkey King Bar's recipe has been increased even more for a total of 4,850 gold. And lastly, Hand of Midas's recipe cost has been reduced back down to 1,750 for a total cost of 2,200 gold. On to the main event, the heroes. Most of the heroes were changed at least slightly, while Bristleback, Chen, Dragon Knight, Lycan, Meepo, Morphling, Pangolier, Hugna, Riki, Techies, and Tinker went untouched. A few heroes had some of their abilities reworked, so we'll cover these big changes first. Bloodseeker's Thirst no longer grants attack speed, and instead will heal Bloodseeker for any enemy unit he kills. Hero kills will heal Bloodseeker for a percentage of the enemy hero or creep's max health. Bloodseeker will still get half of the heal if he does not get the kill, but the enemy hero or creep dies within 300 units of him, and his movement speed increases and true sight over low enemies were untouched. Blood Rage was reworked to increase your attack speed and your spell amp. This ability can no longer be cast on enemies, but you can still cast it on your allies for the spell amp and half of the attack speed value. Be warned, this ability will drain the target's health by a percentage of their max health every second, similar to a more damaging armlet active, and your allies can no longer heal from it. This damage is not lethal, so Bloodseeker cannot deny himself or his allies with it, instead leaving them at 1 HP. Blood Rage can now also be cast without interrupting your movement, so chasing people down has never been easier. Otherwise, Bloodseeker's intelligence was buffed and his talents had some number increases. Important to note is that his level 10 talent was changed from attack speed to himself to attack speed on his Blood Rage, which can benefit his allies, although they will still only receive half of the additional attack speed. Centaur War Runner's Retaliate was changed to work like his old Return ability. There's no active and no more stacks, but enemies will still get hurt by hitting Centaur by a flat amount plus a percentage amount based on your strength. And with the best strength gain in the game, Retaliate will continue to hurt throughout the game. Unfortunately, Retaliate will only do half damage to towers now, hurting your push or when you needed just a bit more damage to get through backdoor protection. And before you check, no, illusions still do not benefit from Retaliate. Centaur's Double Edge and Hoof Stomp cooldown were lowered. Hoof Stomp was buffed additionally to have increased damage at all levels and lower mana cost at early levels, but the stun duration was lowered. His talents were changed slightly to buff his right-click damage but lower his Retaliate damage. Anyone else getting a sense of deja vu? Klink's ulti is once again Death Pact and Strafe is back. Strafe does not projectile spells but will provide 100% evasion from ranged attacks. His skeleton army was moved to his Aghanims, and his old Aghanims was nerfed and is now a level 10 talent. Skeleton Walk was buffed and will not break from casting any of his spells, like Bounty Hunter casting track. That does not include manually casting Searing Arrows. Death Pact no longer gives minus armor, permanent damage, or a flat health increase. Klink's now gets a percentage of the creep's health as health and damage for himself. The spell has 100% uptime at level 3. If there aren't any creeps around in a team fight, you can always cast it on a skeleton archer of yours. They still only take 2 hits to kill for heroes, but they have 1000 HP. Klink's int gain was increased and also had his attack point improved. Searing Arrow's damage was increased slightly, and the mana cost is now flat at all levels. Klink's talent tree was reworked a bit to include a mana regen talent, a free skeleton archer at level 10, even more Searing Arrow's damage, skeleton walk cooldown, more attack range, and a higher percent of health and damage from Death Pact. The Kills Reset Death Pact cooldown talent allows for burst heal during teamfights. Sand King's Caustic Finale was reworked so that it will only explode if the target dies with the slow debuff on it. The explosion has the potential to do massive damage since it adds a percentage of the target's max health. Don't stand next to your Underlord in teamfights. Sand King's talent tree was also moved around, adding damage and survivability earlier on. Now for the rest of the heroes who mostly received number or talent changes. Abaddon's base health regen and Mist Coil cast range were increased, and he had some buffs to his talent tree. Alchemist's stun radius was increased, and late-game talents were buffed slightly. Ancient Apparition's Ice Vortex mana cost was reduced, and his Chilling Touch talents were buffed. Anti-Mage's agility gain was reduced, and his talent tree received a small nerf and buff respectively. Arc Warden's base armor and agility were increased, while the timeout duration of Spark Wraith was reduced slightly. His talent tree was reorganized, but the numbers were overall buffed. Axe's attack speed talents were put lower down. The kill threshold for Culling Blade was increased at upper levels, and he also got a level 20 talent to increase the threshold even further. Bane's base stats were reduced by 1 for all attributes. The mana cost for Brain Sap was increased mostly at lower levels, which hurts his lane. His Spell Amp talent at 15 was buffed, while his movement speed talent at 20 was nerfed. Bat Rider's agility gain was increased, and Sticky Napalm's turn rate slow now scales instead of being flat at all levels. The Ag's upgrade to Flaming Lasso and his level 25 talent were both buffed slightly, and his level 15 talent was changed from Flame Break duration increase to more sticky napalm damage. Beastmaster's mana cost for Boar was increased at all levels, while his mana cost for Axes were reduced. His Hawk talent at 15 was changed from CDR to Vision Range, and his health and axe damage talents were buffed. Bounty Hunter's base mana regen was increased, and the damage spread of his right clicks was reduced so that he does more consistent damage, making it easier to last hit. The mana cost of Track was reduced slightly, and his movement speed talent was buffed. His plus damage talent was changed to Janata damage, which is less overall DPS but means bigger crits. Brewmaster's Thunderclap no longer has a separate value for creeps, so it does the same damage for creeps and heroes. Cinderbrew's mana cost was decreased for lower levels, the damage was rescaled so it's slightly less early on, but slightly more later on, and the backswing animation was improved. Primal Split Spirits were all generally buffed, and the numbers on his talents changed slightly. Broodmother's agility gain was increased. Her slow was buffed and her spiders got more health, but are now more susceptible to magic nukes. Chaos Knight's crit is no longer guaranteed every few seconds and is back to being chance-based. His ulti cooldown and mana cost were lowered dramatically, but now gets less illusions that do less damage at lower levels. The illusions no longer get extra magic resistance either. His CDR talent was buffed and his crit talent was changed accordingly with spell change. His other 25 talent was buffed to have more consistently long stun duration, although less possible max stun time. Clockwork's Rocket Flare vision duration was reduced, and his strength talent removed in favor of changing cogs to take 3 hits for enemies to destroy. Crystal Maiden is no longer tied for slowest hero in the game. Her base int was buffed so that she has more starting mana and mana regen. The radius of her ulti was lowered slightly, but her scepter to apply frostbite to enemies affected by her ulti was buffed. Her Crystal Nova CDR talent was buffed, but the magic resistance talent for her aura was nerfed. Darkseer's base agility was increased, but his base armor was lowered by 1 to compensate, resulting in an effective negative 0.04 armor when compared to the last patch. Vacuum's mana cost was lowered and damage increased, but don't get too excited. IceFrog put Darkseer at his place by nerfing the cooldown from 60, 50, 40, 30 to 60.0, 50.0, 40.0, 30.0. The slow duration on Wall of Replica was increased, and Darkseer got new talents that would increase his Ion Shell radius to 325, increase the tankiness of whomever he puts Ion Shell, especially useful for pushing waves, and increase the damage the illusions created by Wall do. Dark Willow's stun radius on Cursed Crown was increased. Jex's return speed was increased on Terrorize so you get access to Bedlam quicker, and some small talent changes. Dazzle had some of his talents reverted to their old values before 7.26b. Death Prophet got her cast point on her nuke halved and some buffs to her late game talents. Disruptor's kinetic field radius was increased slightly, and he had some changes to his talent tree. Glimpse was fixed so that it will no longer send you to where you died if you get glimpsed soon after respawning, and will now take into account how long you've been dead in the fountain. Be careful when buying back immediately still. Doom has become literally unkillable with a base armor increase of 1. He also received an attack range buff, tying him with Void Spirit for the 3rd longest attack range of any melee hero. His Devourer's gold gain was buffed at early levels, while the regen was nerfed slightly across the board. The backswing on his Scorched Earth was lowered by a 1/3, and 2 of his talents were switched and rescaled accordingly. Drow Ranger got her base stats buffed slightly, starting with her base damage spread reduced, making last hitting easier at early levels. Her movement speed and base armor were also increased, and her talent tree buffed. Earth Spirit got his base strength increased, rolling boulder collision radius increased slightly, and magnetized damage rescaled and buffed at max slightly. His Ags also gains more utility by allowing him to turn himself to stone, where he can then kick himself in whatever direction he was already facing. This can make the already elusive hero even harder to catch. Earthshaker, Fissure duration, made to be scaling with the same max level duration. Enchant Totem backswing animation time reduced, and his level 10 damage talent was changed to be base damage so that you can get the benefit of it during Totem. Elder Titan had his base strength increased and a visual bug fixed. Astral Spirit's return speed was increased, and it no longer refreshes the current buff when you cast a new spirit, and it returns before the original buff expires, which means it now correctly overrides the buff with the new Astral's buff stats. His attack speed talent was put earlier in his talent tree, and he also received a cleave talent at level 20. Ember Spirit's Flame Guard damage per second reduced by 5 at each level. Enchantress got her intelligence gain increased, and turn rate improved slightly. Her Ags now also provides plus 150 attack range on top of the Sproink ability. Nature's Attendant's heal interval was halved, while the total healing amount remains the same, and her movement speed talent was buffed slightly. Enigma had his Malefice damage rescaled and reduced slightly. His talent tree was buffed slightly, and his level 10 talent was changed to plus 4 second Midnight Pulse duration for even longer area denial. Faceless Void, Time Walk's Scepter upgrade AoE bash range was increased by 100 alongside Time Walk talent changes. Grimstroke attack range increased by 25 alongside some talent changes. Gyrocopter's base int was increased, and the launch time for homing missile was lowered. The cooldown on Flat Cannon was buffed, and his talent tree received multiple numerical buffs. Husker had his base damage and agility gain increased slightly. The knockback from Inner Fire was lowered, and his attack range talent at 25 was increased. Roshan no longer taking damage from Life Break hurts, but it doesn't stop him from being able to take Roche. Invoker got his base damage increased. Forge Spirit base attack time improved. The mana requirement for the armor removing Melting Strike passive was removed. Invoke no longer triggers spell events like Magic Stick, so it won't give stick charges on use to enemies anymore, and his level 10 talent was buffed. Io base movement speed increased by 40, almost giving him free boots. Jakiro's dual breath mana cost was increased at lower levels, hurting his lane. Ice Path's mana cost was also increased, but his talent tree was buffed. Juggernaut's Omnislash was changed to now provide a flat plus 40 attack speed at all levels, but had the attack speed multiplier reduced from 1.7 to 1.6, meaning higher attack speed earlier with a bit less attack speed late game. Jug's Blade Fury talents were also buffed. Keeper of the Light's Illuminate channel duration was reduced, which means more damage earlier and less time standing still. Will-O-Wisp Flicker change means that orders you press while hypnotized are now queued properly, and your previous queued actions are kept, making the spell overall less annoying to deal with. Kunkka only had his level 25 Tidebringer talent increased for even bigger cleave damage. Legion Commander's base strength was reduced slightly, but the big change is the increase to the amount of dual damage she gets at later levels, allowing her to snowball even more than before. Her dual damage talent was lowered slightly to compensate, while the two other talents were buffed slightly. Leshrax's stat numbers got adjusted slightly, with an increase to his base damage and strength gain, and a small reduction to his attack range. His Ags was buffed, and that on top with his talent tree changes enables him to do even more damage than before. Lich had some talent tree buffs and reorganization, making it easier for him to push out lanes and get spells off early game, and helping him scale well into late game. Lifestealer's last hitting got a bit easier with his minimum base damage increased, and also some nice talent buffs. Lena's Laguna Blade damage increased by 50 on all levels. Dragon Slave backswing animation time reduced, and level 20 Fiery Soul talent buffed slightly. Lion's base attack speed and base armor were increased alongside. His talent tree was also reorganized and changed in a way that helps him scale better into the late game. Lone Druid's strength gain was reduced slightly. Spirit Bear was buffed, while the armor gain from LD's ulti was nerfed. His level 25 talent was also reduced ever so slightly, but the most important change is Savage Roar no longer duplicating cast on either target that is unable to cast. Before, this abuse allowed for LD or his bear to roar even while silenced or stunned. Luna's base damage increased slightly. Lunar's Blessing percent damage aura was changed to be worse early, but better at later levels. However, the armor portion was removed. Moonglaze were buffed to have more bounces early, but less damage at low levels to compensate. Magnus got all of his non-ultimate abilities slightly buffed, with Empower damage buffed, Shockwave slow increased, Skewer cooldown reduced, and its radius increased. He had some talent buffs as well. Mars got a bit smarter with his base intelligence increased. The formation time for Arena was halved, and a small talent buff. Maybe now your teammates will stop missing their ultis. Medusa's base strength and int were increased, and she also had the cast point and cooldown of Mystic Snake buffed. Her big change is now Split Shot is now toggleable again. When active, she no longer gets full damage on the primary target, but she has more split shots, with more bonus range, and they are at a higher percentage of her damage. Mirana had her ult Moonlight Shadow movement speed reduced and made scaling with the previous flat rate as the max level. Sacred Arrow cooldown was increased, leap distance increased, and she got a small talent buff. Monkey King got his base armor increased by 3, helping his lane. However, Jingu Mastery damage and hit tracker duration were reduced, with the latter being made scaling. Wukong's command attack interval was improved slightly, along with the numbers on some of his talents. Naga Siren's movement speed increased by 10, her ensnare cast point reduced, and her Ag's upgrade now also reduces cooldown by 20 seconds. Nature's Prophet's base armor was reduced. The golden XP bounty for his treants were reduced by half, making it less problematic if you accidentally feed them, and his talents had some small number changes and were swapped. Necrophos's Death Pulse cooldown was buffed slightly. Night Stalker had some level 10 talent changes to help his early game power spike. Nyx Assassin had his Impale damage increased and his level 10 Spell Amp talent increased. Ogre Magi had his agility gain reduced slightly, and his Ag spell Unrefined Fire Blast mana cost reduced, potentially saving you a large chunk of mana as the percentage cost is based on your current amount of mana. Omni Knight got his base movement speed and Purification cast range increased. Degen Aura was changed so that it now only slows movement speed in a bigger radius. His talent tree was changed slightly to make him scale better. Oracle had the cast point of Purifying Flames halved and his corresponding talent buffed. His new level 25 talent means you need to channel only 1 second to get the full 2.5 second route. Outworld Devourer's Essence Flux active duration was increased along with his slow duration. Arcane Orb mana cost was reduced on early levels. ODE got a quality of life change for Astral, with it now having a cast indicator that shows the damage area, and the cast range on Astral was also increased on early levels. His spell Lifesteal talent at 25 was also buffed. Phantom Assassin had her base damage increased by 3, and Blur's Ag's cooldown reduced by 2. She had some talent changes, but the big one is the removal of the Cleave talent for flash farming that was replaced with increased blink cast range. Phantom Lancer had his very wide attack damage spread reduced from 48 to 70 to more manageable 52 to 66. Same average damage with less extreme outliers. Spirit Lance damage was increased slightly, and PL's talents were changed slightly. Phoenix had his Fire Spirit's mana cost increased, while Egg hit count was rescaled from 5, 8, 1 to 6, 8, 10. He also received 2 small buffs to his talent tree. Huck's rapid fire talent attacks even faster, while his massive silence is now only really big. Pudge had his base health regen increased by 1, but his strength gain reduced by 0.8 per level. Meat Hook also had its cooldown at early levels reduced. The slow from Rot was increased in early levels only, his Rot damage talent was increased slightly, and his Flesh Heap strength gain was buffed. Queen of Pain's strength gain was decreased, while the mana cost on Shadow Strike was increased at higher levels, and the initial damage lowered slightly at all levels. Her ulti damage was buffed. Razor had his strength and agility gain buffed. His Plasma Field cooldown lowered at all levels, the AoE aspect of his movement speed passive removed, and the passive damage from his ulti was removed, but replaced with more damage on the strikes triggered by nearby enemies. His passive damage talent was replaced with an additional target talent for more damage as well. The big change is Static Link no longer disarms you and once again allows you to change targets during Link, but you can keep attacking your Link target while moving if you choose. Rubik was given more attack speed and a smaller attack damage spread. Fade Bolt was buffed drastically with increased damage, reduced mana cost, and percentage-based base damage reduction. His level 10 damage talent was also changed to base damage, and his level 15 talent was changed to allow him to steal hero damage with his Fade Bolt. Combined with the new percentage-based Fade Bolt damage reduction and the bounces, expect to be dishing out some heavy right clicks with Rubik if you decide to take the damage talents. Shadow Demon had a small talent buff. Shadow Fiend had his base damage increased and his souls reworked. Necromastery max soul count was reduced while increasing the damage per soul, which means more damage at higher levels, especially with the buff to his level 20 talent. Requiem of Souls was also adjusted to release a wave per soul instead of per 2, meaning the new SF will release 2 extra waves with max souls. Shadow Shaman's base int was increased, so he'll have more starting mana. The bounty spread on Mass Serpent wards was reduced slightly, while multiple of his talents were buffed. Silencer's first spell, Arcane Curse, had its damage increased, and Global Silence cooldown was reduced. His early talent tree numbers were buffed, and his ulti duration talent at 25 was changed to 30% CDR. Skywrath Mage had his Silence CDR talent buffed. Slarder's Corrosive Haze armor reduction was buffed, with some more small late-game talent changes. His Vision talent was removed in favor of even more armor reduction on his ulti. Slark had his base attack speed lowered slightly. Snapfire's attack speed slow was removed from Lil Shredder and added to Scatterblast. Lil Shredder now reduces armor by 1 per attack, but the damage on the spell was lowered at early levels. Her level 15 Scatterblast damage talent was increased, and her level 15 Disarm talent was removed in favor of multi-shot Scatterblast. Sniper's shrapnel damage and his Assassinate Ag Scepter stun duration were reduced. Goodbye, Support Sniper, you will not be missed. Spectre had a small base health regen nerf, but the main changes were Haunt Illusions no longer have a fixed movement speed or a 1-second delay before attacking, which means Haunt Illusions will now be based on Spectre's movement speed and attack immediately. Her Ags was buffed to be target spell immune units, and Desolate's damage was increased. The search range reduction on Desolate means it will be easier to proc now, but it no longer reduces vision, which in some cases was very strong. Spirit Breaker's Charge of Darkness cast point reduced slightly, and his right-click damage talent was increased. Storm Spirit's agility gain was increased, and the mana cost for Ball Lightning was lowered, allowing for longer zips. Sven's base MS was increased by 10, and his Storm Hammer Dispel talent is now able to target Yule's units and dispel it off. Warcry no longer provides bonus damage, and its movement speed was reduced, but allies now also benefit from the movement speed buff. Sven's cleave range was increased, and God's Strength, while no longer providing strength, had its bonus damage and duration increased. The new level 25 talent buffs God's Strength even further. Templar's Assassin's Meld ability has been rescaled to give more minus armor at early levels and given a scaling cooldown instead of the old flat 6-second cooldown. Lastly, her Refraction Instance's talent was increased by 2. Terrorblade no longer loses movement speed during meta, but loses a small amount of movement speed on his talent to compensate. Tidehunter's base strength was increased, and his Kraken Shell now blocks an additional 2 damage at all levels. Lastly, the level 20 increased damage block on Kraken was buffed, so he can block even more damage. Timbersaw base strength and mana regen were buffed slightly, while his mana regen talent was nerfed to compensate and his reactive armor talent buffed. Tiny was given a buff to his base regen, and toss duration was increased. Avalanche was changed to no longer have a delay and instead by based on projectile speed, which basically just means the delay from cast point to enemies being stunned is slightly quicker. Tree Grab has been changed back to having a 5-hit charge with buffs to the bonus damage, and Cleave with a talent to buff the charges, while Grow has been rescaled to less bonus damage at level 1 and higher at 2 and 3. Treant Protector's Leech Seed is now a targeted spell again that slows and deals damage per pulse and heals allies who are within range for the same amount. Treant's Axe was also buffed to have charges, allowing you to enchant even more trees with unobstructed vision. Troll Warlord only had his level 15 talents changed. The Whirling Axe's talent was a straight damage increase, while the +3 max fervor stacks was changed to +5 fervor attack speed. The additional attack speed is better than the stacks because it means you're hitting faster earlier, which means faster stacks and more ensnare procs. Additionally, the catch-up point between the two talents is at 15 stacks, so the only time you would have been hitting faster before was if you had full stacks, which was mostly only relevant when hitting buildings or Roshan. Tusk's base armor was increased, and Snowball was buffed with increased damage per ally at higher levels and an even bigger CDR talent. Underlord got a few buffs and changes. First, his attack range was increased from 150 to 175, making him one of the few melee heroes with a larger base attack range. Atrophy aura was reverted so that it no longer provides bonus damage, but the temporary damage he gets was buffed to compensate. He also got a major buff to Firestorm, giving it a shorter cast point, increasing the AoE with levels, and the ability to easily take ancient stacks. Pit's cooldown was reduced slightly at all levels, and his level 10 and 15 talents were changed to have more defensive level 10 talents and some utility at 15. Undying's ulti was changed to amplify all damage done to targets that he right-clicks. Multiple attacks will refresh the duration of the debuff. Ursa got big nerfs to Earth Shock. Max slow went from 55% to 40%, as well as the cooldown being increased by 2 at all levels. These nerfs are going to hinder Ursa's ability to chase by a large margin, but his new Earthshock cooldown talent will make it bearable. Meanwhile, the cooldown on his ulti was increased for the early game. Venge has a small vision buff on Wave of Terror and changes to her level 20 talent choices with a damage increase to Magic Missile or even more bonus attack range for allied range heroes, bringing her total attack range bonus to a whopping 225. Venno got a small movement speed buff, increased damage on his passive, and a Plague Ward buff with their health increase and duration increase talent. Poison Sting did lose its utility of reducing HP regen, which was nice when you didn't have a Vessel against an Alk or Morph, but he can do more damage overall now. The cooldown change to his Aghanims also makes the item a better pickup before max Poison Nova. Viper's base damage was increased and his intelligence buffed, so you'll be able to cast more spells before running out of mana in teamfights. Visage's attack projectile speed was increased, and his mana cost on Soul Assumption was rescaled and lowered at early levels to help his lane. Those on top of his level 15 talent buff make this hero an even bigger threat early game. Void Spirit's Aghanims was nerfed with the increase to his charge replenish time on Resonant Pulse. Warlock's cast range for Shadow Word was increased at the higher levels, gaining an extra 150 cast range at max level. Core Weaver received some buffs with the Shikuchi speed increase and talent tree buffs, whereas Support Weaver was really hurt by the Aghanim's scepter nerfs. Wind Ranger's Focus Fire got a quality of life change. You can now pause her attacks during her ulti by using the stop or halt commands, whereas before you could only use directional movement. This makes the spell more intuitive and less likely for your teammates to accidentally kill themselves on Blade Mail. Winter Wyvern's ulti cooldown was increased by 10, but went untouched otherwise. Witchdoctor only received a small change with his 20 talent. The plus 15% Maledict burst damage means plus 15% damage done every tick, rescaling the spell's total damage done per tick from 16, 24, 32, 40% to 31, 39, 47, 55%. Wraith King got a small base damage increase, but they removed his bonus damage from Vampiric Aura. Instead, they buffed the damage of his skeletons, increased his lifesteal aura, and allowed ranged heroes to be affected by it again even if at a lower percentage. And last but not least, Zeus. Zeus got a nice movement speed buff and some damage increase on Arc Lightning and his ulti Thunder God's Wrath. However, the mana cost of Lightning Bolt was increased drastically at early levels, and Thunder God's Wrath and Nimbus received flat cooldown increases. His talent tree was also changed slightly with the mana regen nerf and the cast range increase. We'll see if people start taking the cast range over the arc lightning damage at 25. Wow, that was a long one. Well, that wraps up our rundown of patch 7.27b. Let us know what you guys think of all the changes in the comments. And remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you'll know when we come out with our follow-up video providing more in-depth analysis. Thanks everyone for watching, and good luck in the new patch.